Good afternoon, everybody. My name is William Brown. I am from Florida in the United States, and today I am going to be discussing performance psychology. What goes on in our heads while we are playing, while we are performing, while we are on stage. So I'm going to start off with a few questions. Question number one, and you can just raise your hand. Who has had a performance that did not go as well as a run-through in practice? Yes, I'm pretty sure that's everybody. What was the problem? Raise your hand if you think it was maybe a lack of focus. I've had that. Was it random thoughts going through your brain? Yeah, I've had that. Yeah. Or was it distractions happening in the concert hall? Distractions, yeah. So the question is then, with all those distractions going through our head, what do we think about during performance? Would anybody be kind enough to share, and I'll start out first, would anybody be kind enough to share what's the craziest thought you've had go through your head during a performance? Mine, I'm pretty sure I tried to come up with a better ending to the Star Wars movies while I was playing a marimba solo. Just crazy stuff flitting through your head. And a lot of times I play one good note and I suddenly imagine all the applause that's gonna happen at the end or something. Does anybody have any crazy things going through their head that they can think of to share? Yes, that's great. You're thinking about everything except what you are supposed to be focused on at the moment, okay? So, how do we get better at something that it's all mental? It's so different from what we practice every day. We practice our scales, the notes, the rhythms of the piece, and we try to perform that. But then we have these crazy mental blockages that come into play. So how do we get better at that? First of all, I'm going to share my story dealing with performance psychology issues and ending up with where I'm at currently. So when I was very young and playing percussion, it seemed really simple to me. I practiced and then I played, and it was about the same. I didn't really think about much when I was playing because I wasn't worried about maybe what would happen after the concert or what people would think. I was just like, oh yeah, I'll just play exactly what I did in practice. But at some point, this realization hit, and it became much more scary. When I decided I wanted to pursue music as a passion and as a career, all of a sudden, my performances had real weight behind them. I was worried about what each performance would mean, how it would reflect on me, how it would reflect on my teachers and my colleagues, and it became way too stressful. And that led to, frankly, just bad performances. I wasn't playing as well as I could. So I did this first round of research on the problem. And I discovered something called The Inner Game of Tennis, which is weird. But it's a book about what goes through a player's head while they're playing tennis. And it was really stunningly applicable to what I was going through, even though I wouldn't think of percussion and tennis as being too similar. But it was very similar. So all of a sudden, I started to apply a few small concepts. I started to make sure I had a consistent performance routine. Ichen talked about that in her clinic a bit. And one big thing I started doing was giving myself positive affirmations before I performed. I would really just tell myself, this is going to be great, this is going to be good, everybody's going to love it, it's going to go well, to make sure I was framing myself in a positive light. So then I had some success with that. I went into graduate auditions and I was able to do better getting into universities that I wanted to. But then the stakes raised again, and now I was auditioning for professional orchestras, for groups like this one, for opportunities that were paid. So it became really my career and my livelihood on the line. And I realized that if I was going to completely fix all my performance problems, which I'm not there yet, but I would go back through another round of research. I started working out of a book called Performance Success by Don Green. And I also started reading and understanding this book called Peak: Secrets from the New Science of Expertise, which is by a guy named Anders Ericsson, who's also from Florida. And it talks about how to improve really anything you want to. So you don't have to remember all this. We'll get into it quickly. The last thing I did that I'm still doing is I actually started seeing and having sessions with a sports psychologist. So he regularly worked with football, basketball, and baseball players. I added myself to his roster, and we started focusing on performance as if it was just as stressful, just as big as a sporting event. So the inner game of tennis taught me about this concept called self 1 and self 2. Now, it's basically talking about the left side of your brain and the right side of your brain. And I was very skeptical of this concept at first, but it really did, as I thought about it more, it really did seem to be something that felt true in my own experience. I had a self 1 that was very analytical, and I had a self 2 that was very focused and in the flow. And so the inner game of tennis starts to teach you how to get into self 2. Now, that wasn't quite enough. Performance Success, the book by Don Green, started to teach me how to apply those things, how to use specific exercises and techniques to really get myself in the zone for performing. And then Peak taught me how to take all of those things and improve them daily through consistent and deliberate practice. So, now that we've outlined the basics and where I'm coming from, let's go ahead, next slide please, and talk about self 1 and self 2. So self 1 is the left brain. It is analytical. It's the thing that's telling you, oh, that wasn't so good. Oh, I'm worried about the passage coming up. Okay, you messed that up. You better try really hard on this next thing and hit it, otherwise the whole performance is done. It's very talkative. It's that constant stream of talking that's just running through your head while you perform. It's stuck in the past, and it's anxious about the future. Self 1 is distracted by anything that happens, anything moving, any sounds that you're hearing, and it's interrupted. It interrupts itself in its crazy flow of talking. Self 2 is instinctual. It's your muscle memory. It's what you've learned in your practice that you do every day. It is quiet. It's not talkative. It is in the present. It's not worried about the past or the future. It's here and now. It is focused on what you need to do, and it can even get you into something called flow state. Flow state is where this all leads. I hope we've all had the experience, even for a moment, where suddenly the music and you are just one, and you're playing without thinking, you're playing without worrying, and oftentimes you can't even remember what it felt like, but you know it was the best playing you can possibly do. So flow state, again, it's hard to get there, so we need specific strategies and specific ways to practice getting into this zone of performance where we are not worried about the past, we are not anxious about the future, but we are completely instinctively in the present. The number one thing we can do, which you've already done several times today, is engage with your breathing. Breathing is meditation. It's the easiest way wherever you are. If you engage and think about your breathing, it's the easiest way to start calming your mind, calming anxieties and getting towards where the flow state can be. I've talked a lot so far about the crazy thoughts that come into our head and go out and flit all about. And a lot of times I've found that when we're thinking about these things, we have a need to rationalize them. We have a need to work them out in some way. Like when I was, thinking about how to end Star Wars the best while I was performing, I felt a need to continue it all the way through. But the best thing to do is to just dismiss those distractions immediately. Don't dwell on them. Don't worry about the fact that they came up in your mind. Simply acknowledge the fact that maybe there's a baby crying, and then dismiss it. Acknowledge the fact that somebody came in through the doors late, and then dismiss it. Acknowledge the fact that maybe one of the bars is loose on the marimba, and then dismiss it, okay? You can hear these thoughts, you can acknowledge them, and then push them away. The third method I use to get rid of this self-one, this left brain that's just always talking in my head, is to provide it an outlet for all that talking. What I do, just playing a little game in my own brain, is I promise it. I say, look, after the concert, I promise I'm going to take my journal and I'm going to write down everything I felt about it, okay? So everything I feel, all the good stuff and all the bad stuff, I'm going to write that down. So we don't have to think about it now, I'm going to write it down later. And having that outlet helps me tremendously to know that I can analyze what happened later. I don't have to do it while I'm still trying to figure out where my next entrance is or something. Number 4 is I always just want to encourage people that whenever you have a piece of repertoire that's giving you trouble, get as many performances of it as possible. It's going to be very difficult to have one magical performance that is everything you want it to be. The best way to get consistently good performances is to consistently perform, okay? Grounding yourself is a way to touch base with what's happening in the physical world around you, because again, this is a feeling I hope you can relate to. Sometimes when you step onto stage and the lights are glaring in your face and you can't see anything, it's noisy, it's people you don't know, things are unfamiliar on the stage, you start to get this disassociative, out-of-body feeling, where you suddenly just are feeling like you're floating along in yourself, but you're not quite grabbing onto everything that you need to. Grounding is something that can fix that. So right now, it's not a hard exercise, but it's a very important one. Right now, just pick out 5 things in the room that you can see. 5 specific things. Now let's think of 4 things we are touching right now. The chair, fabric, your hair, anything. Now let's pick out 3 things we can hear. Is it the air conditioning? Is it somebody warming up? Is it somebody talking loudly in the audience? 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. When I do this exercise during a performance, it centers me in a way that's very important. When I'm getting too anxious and thinking about all the crazy logistics, it grounds me in a way that allows me to do exactly what I've been training to do and practicing to do. No crazy thinking, no crazy mentality, just groundedness. The next exercise is called visualization. Visualization. And it's about seeing in your mind's eye the result and the circumstances of what you want to achieve. So I'm going to read you the visualization that I used before my last master's recital, which was last May. So I sat down in the green room before the performance, and I closed my eyes and I thought through this. I am approaching the marimba, center stage, facing my colleagues and mentors. I set up the score neatly facing me. I feel calm, engaged, focused, and centered with each breath I take as I set up my performance space and get comfortable. I can hear the chatter of the audience and the other musicians warming up. I see each phrase on the page reflected in my mind's eye, well practiced, well rehearsed. I can hear the sound translated through my instrument in my mind as my eyes dance across the page for a final review. My feet are connected and centered with the marimba frame through the floor. My mallets are gently secured between my fingers. My hands are strong but relaxed. I feel my posture align, my shoulders relax as I begin to address the room. The volume of the hall comes to a slow halt. I release any last-minute tensions. I breathe in, relax, breathe out, and trust my craft. The purpose of writing something like that out is to prepare myself for the insanity of going on stage and playing a marimba for people. It's to make sure my own mind knows what's going to happen and make sure I know how I want it to happen, okay? If anything interrupts that or anything crazy happens, it's okay. I already have a roadmap for success for how to set myself up, how to enter, and then how to play. Between using grounding and visualization, those two things keep me centered, ready to play, and focused in a way that has been very important for my performance success. One of the last things I do, going back to the self one and the self two, oftentimes just like I said, I bargained with self one about, okay, say everything you want, but we don't have to analyze it right now. I'm going to put it all in this notebook later. Similarly, this was especially helpful when I was doing orchestral auditions. I would tell self one, look, you are in charge of everything that's about to happen logistically. You are in charge of picking the mallets up to play. You are in charge of setting up your snare drum, making sure the snares are off, knowing which excerpt you are about to play. So as soon as self one does all that, I pick up my xylophone mallets and I set myself in front of the xylophone. Good, we've handled that. Now it's self two's job to smoothly play Porgy and Bess, okay? Or Appalachian Spring, or whatever xylophone excerpt you want. A key part of having success when self two takes over is that it's scary. We like having our analytical brain in control because that's what's in control when we're practicing. That's what's in control when we're thinking about, okay, should I phrase it that way or this way? Or was that a wrong note? Did I chip the bar or did I use a wrong sticking? Was that the node? Do I need to move my sticks in? That's all the analytical brain. So as soon as we switch to the right brain, suddenly it's quiet and it's kind of scary. So a key part of making sure you can make that switch is having the courage to risk in performance. Having the courage to both risk a successful performance and risk a failing performance. Both success and failure can be scary because we just don't know which one is going to happen. But if we are quieting our mind and we're about to perform, we must risk and let go in order to actually play our best. The left brain thinks that if you just think really hard about every single note while you play, that's going to be the best avenue to performance. But it's not. You can tell from personal experience, it's not. You have to let go, you have to risk, and let self-2 get you into a flow state of performance. So, if anybody is willing, I would love it if you would come up and we could try to just talk through a few things, play through something very quickly. Again, you don't have to play a whole 7-minute piece or something. And then talk about what you felt during the performance. Do I have any volunteers for that? Just have to keep moving on. Okay. Quick leg. Thank you so much for playing. Yes. Another round of applause. So my goal is to just establish, these aren't things that can be fixed in a day, but my goal is to establish that these mental problems, I hope many of the things I've talked about are things you've gone through yourself, or at least some facet of it. Otherwise, maybe I'm just the worst performer ever. But the thing is, when we are worried about our mental preparation and performance, we are musicians, we are great at practicing, okay? What that last book, Peak, talks about is that you can practice anything. So if we want to practice our mental preparedness, we can do it. Every time we do a run-through, we can prepare ourselves for the mental pressures that come with it. We can do research, we can do our breathing exercises, our grounding exercises, our visualizations. We can practice performing just as much as we practice the piece. And I hope that is helpful to starting you all towards a path where you feel more comfortable on stage. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you very much. That's it.